Hi, everybody, and welcome to Mecha Dragon. I'm Will, and today we're talking about the 6th episode of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, titled One World, One People. For those of you listening to the show as an audio podcast, I'd urge you to check us out on YouTube, which has become our primary platform. But I do want to take a moment and welcome to the show special guest host, Written Flows, from the Written Flows YouTube channel. Welcome to the show, man.
Hey, man. Awesome. Thanks, Will, for having me on. I'm very excited to get this on today.
Thanks for coming on. I've really enjoyed watching your videos. I'd encourage everybody to look you up on YouTube, but we got a lot to talk about with Falcon and the Winter Soldier today.
We really do, man.
And this show really surprised me. Well, I don't know if it surprised me so much, but I've really enjoyed watching this show. And I thought we could start with just some like sort of general sort of what was like your general reaction, general impression of this final episode of this show that we just watched?
So, coming into this episode, I knew that they had several plot points that they needed to wrap up. So, I was expecting them to get to the action relatively quickly. You know, like I knew that they weren't going to kind of play around and spend a lot of time, with exposition on things that didn't matter. I was not expecting to get the reveal of Sam's suit in the first 4 minutes, though. I was not expecting
Me neither. That was like right away. You know, they did not mess around with that.
Yeah, so hey, like you guys been speculating about the suit this whole week. Here you go. We're giving it to
there
you.
It is. Yep. Yeah. So. Yeah, and they really didn't waste any time getting started with this episode at all.
They did
was
not.
Like started with a bang, you know. It's like I guess it started with that like little montage of Carly being like, "We're ready. Let's the movement's ready. Let's do it. You know, we got to stop the vote," or whatever she said. And then, suddenly it's Sam coming in. The Wakandans were not messing around when they made that suit for him. You know?
No, I have an interesting question for you, actually. You can give me your opinion on this because I've gone back and forth with this with some of my friends. When Sam opens the case, right, do you think that it was just the wing contraption that was in the case and he had the uniform fabricated himself? Mm-hmm. Or do you think they gave him the entire outfit?
I felt certain that it was going to be red, white, and blue. The suit.
Really? Okay.
You know, like I didn't know whether it was gonna like have a star on the chest, you know, but I felt like it was gonna be his like Captain America, outfit.
Yeah.
And honestly, I wasn't 100% sure if it was gonna have wings. I kind of figured that it would, but I thought, well, I don't know if it's gonna be like a vibranium like suit to give him like these abilities. Like I did not think it was gonna be just like, T'Challa's suit or anything, but I just thought it's definitely going to be red, white, and blue because that felt to me like where his like character arc was going.
Yeah, very obviously.
And I figured it was going to be awesome, but beyond that, I wasn't too sure, honestly. Like this show, I would say this show as a whole surprised me with like how deep they went into like reflecting like the present moment in society and in the world, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which was a pleasant surprise to me in a lot of ways. But yeah, I guess I wasn't sure about much other than I figured it was going to be red, white, and blue, if that answers your question.
Yeah, they really didn't pull any punches whatsoever. And I don't know why we would expect them to, man, because, Marvel, I think, has a pretty good track record of knowing how to stay on point, but also saying whatever it is they want to say. Mm-hmm. So, I knew when the Isaiah Bradley character was introduced, I was like, okay, they're going to go some places here that they're going to make some people uncomfortable, but it'll be for the betterment of, the fandom as a whole.
Yeah, this was not a brainless, summer blockbuster, action movie, which as fun as those movies can be.
Yeah.
This movie, the way I've been thinking about this show and ever since WandaVision 2 is like, it seems like what Marvel is doing with these Disney Plus shows is they're making like a 6-hour like movie.
Yes.
Because it really seems up to the level of their other movies with the production value and like the act, like you name it, right? The action sequences. I mean, like right out of the gate with the first episode, this show had that big scene with Sam in the air and the helicopters and the like. That was nuts. But at the same time, because like it's a show and they have all this extra time that you don't get in a movie, they're able to go deeper with the characters and everything else. And so that's something I really enjoyed. And so, like, did you feel like that this was a satisfying conclusion to you, this episode?
So, the cool thing about being a fan is that I think that we have the ability to be able to appreciate something for what it is. You know, like you can laud over how great a show was, but I think you also need to be able to point out what bits weren't good. You know, so I was very satisfied with the conclusion. It was very obvious that this was the end that they wanted to get to. I really liked the Carly character. I don't know if I'm as happy with how her character was brought to an end as I am with some of the other characters. I also wasn't too fond of the way they decided to take Sharon's character, but I get it.
Ooh, yeah.
If we're gonna be building towards, you know, a possible Captain America 4 film, or we're gonna be looking at possibly a season 2. So to answer your question, I was very satisfied with the ending. There were definitely bits that I think, you know, I wish they would have took it in a different direction. But you can't get everything you ask for. And I think ultimately we all wanted to see Sam fully come into this role of being Captain America. And I think that in that transition, the show made it very apparent how powerful this is. Like, you know, at this current time in our nation, we have a black man as Captain America, and he said something in his speech then. He says, he's like, there are going to be millions of people out there that are going to hate me for this. I can feel it right now. And I felt that when he said that. So, yeah, I mean, and when you look at the talent that they've sourced for these Disney Plus shows, just up until now, you know, these aren't B team guys, you know? And so when you talk about the format that they've chosen to take with these Disney Plus shows, it almost makes us fans happy that some of these characters were neglected up in the MCU up until now, right? Because in the MCU up until now, with Wanda and Vision and Bucky and Sam, you could say that they didn't get as much screen time as the other characters. But now, at the end, in the conclusion of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, we're happy they didn't, because now I feel more entrenched to these characters from these two shows than I do to some of the characters that we dealt with for 18 plus movies. I mean,
yeah, they've really brought them to the forefront, you know.
Yeah,
it's hard not to feel like these characters are going to be central to like the whole MCU moving forward. At least that's how I feel.
Yeah.
After this, and there's something about Sam and Anthony Mackie that, like, ever since his introduction in Captain America: The Winter Soldier, like he's got that charisma, you know, and he's always like fun to watch, and you know, but there's also something about him that really he has this ability to like really draw you in, and like I've been very invested in his character, I guess is what I'm getting at. And we're going to talk more about Sam in a second.
Okay.
But did you have any other sort of like overall thoughts about this finale before we get into like more targeted like topics?
Yeah, I mean, you know, so just that, you know, in the finale, I was really hoping they were going to deliver on the big reveal and the big Captain America and the suit thing, and they did that. And like we said, you know, they did it fairly early. I really wanted to see them bring the Bucky and Yori storyline to a close. The entire season, man, I was so tense every single episode. I was just like, how are they going to do this? Because I wanted them to do it justice, right? Of course, you want him to be able to go to Yori and say, hey, you know, the Winter Soldier killed your son, and you know, I was that guy, and I'm not anymore. And it would be really cool, you know, and sort of tearjerkery, you know, if Yori's like, it's okay, I understand. But at the same time, if you want them to be realistic, I like the way they decided to have him say it and then just have him leave. You know, because you know in that moment, Yori's not going to be completely understanding.
Oh, yeah. And, you know and it's like, you know, maybe they had a slightly longer conversation that we didn't see. Maybe they didn't. But I don't think they lingered on it any longer than they had to. Like, I felt about right to me, I guess. Would you agree with that?
it was perfect, you know. And what Marvel and Kevin Feige and Louis D'Esposito have perfected, they have perfected the craft thus far in the MCU of giving themselves the appropriate amount of wiggle room. And you can see that throughout the entire MCU, right? Like, even look at Sam's suit. We spent the whole season waiting for Sam's suit, right? And they give us the reveal of Sam's suit, but they give us no specifics about it. They could come around in Captain America 4 and, you know, say all of this crazy stuff about the different components it's built of, and, you know, the fabric is made out of, and they won't be going against anything they told us in the finale here, you know. And even with that scene, you know, they could come back in the next season or in the next film and say, hey, you know, Yori said this to Bucky, and it's not going to go against anything that they told us here in the finale. You know, I feel like they've really perfected the craft of giving themselves the right amount of wiggle room to later on down the road be able to take storylines wherever they want to take it, you know.
Yeah, and I think this show has created a lot of opportunity for reverberations in the MCU, like stuff happening as a result of this show, right? That could be real interesting and affect a whole bunch of other stuff. Yeah, so okay, well, let's get into the main topics, because there's a lot to cover.
It is.
and you know, and by the way, like, at any point, if you want to bring up something that I haven't got to, please feel free.
For sure.
And we'll talk about it. So, okay, so let's talk about Sam, shall we?
Okay.
So first of all, that suit, man. I mean, we had a couple words about it, but like, and like you said, like, we see that right away, and like, I love that first shot we really get of it when he throws the shield like at the window, and you just for like a second see it there, and you see like the star on his chest, and I was like, yes, they did it. You know, that was my reaction to. What was your reaction to like seeing it initially the first time there?
So the entire week leading up to the episode, I tried my best to not be on social media at all, because I was really worried. Someone was going to spoil it for me. And right around episode 2 or 3, there was a leaked toy reveal that sort of showed what the suit was going to look like. And I didn't even mean to see it. I was just on Twitter and, you know, boom, hey, here's the toy that got released overseas. And I was like, oh man, you know, so I was worried that it wasn't going to be as impactful and it wasn't going to be as cool to me. And then in the week leading up to the finale, I want to say Thursday morning, a clip leaked of a trailer that showed the suit. It showed that exact scene. And I was like, well, you know, this kind of takes away from it for me as well. But when it happened, it didn't. Man, I was elated.
Nice.
It was like 3:10 a.m. in the morning here, man, and I was on the sofa like, yes, this is it. This is what we've been waiting for.
Yeah, so, that's right. Yeah, I stay up on Thursday nights to watch it too, but for me, I'm on the West Coast, so it's not quite as late or early.
Yeah,
I guess
it's like 11 o'clock for you, 12 o'clock.
Yeah, 12 o'clock. Yeah, but yeah. I mean, like, for me too, I was like, it was a thrilling moment too, you know, because I think part of it is also that you know, I always had this feeling that Sam was like the natural person to take up the mantle of Captain America, you know, after Steve goes away, right? And so, I mean, on one hand, you know, you also have Steve giving him the shield, and you get a sense that, like, this is sort of the right sort of like passing of the torch in a way. I mean, they're different people, obviously, and that's something else I want to talk about in a minute. But like, it was exciting, and then like also like the way he used the suit through like the whole episode was really cool, because like, first of all, he's got the wings, and presumably the whole thing's made out of vibranium, right? So it's
whole thing,
it's like super tough, and like. I thought it was so cool how he used the shield, right? Like, because we got that great, like, training montage of him, like, flipping through the air and, like, practicing catching it and stuff. I'm like, damn, like, I could never do that. But, you know, I especially love that shot where he's coming at the helicopter. And that was so funny after he comes up out of the water and he's like, boy, you just deserve this ass whooping, or whatever he said. That made me laugh so much. But then he like throws it at the door, it bounces back, he grabs it, and he like pushes that guy out. That was like one of the coolest things, coolest action beats in the episode. Like, were you also like, what did you think about like all the stuff he was doing with his suit and his shield and everything?
So it excites me because he just got these wings, right? And he just got this shield. So going forward, we can expect for him to become even more elusive, even more effective with the shield. And then it also, for people that like to dive a little bit deeper into the fandom, it makes you wonder, like during the time they spent away, if Steve was teaching him stuff. I'm sure this is something that's been on Steve's mind for a long time. So in that time where they were fugitives, maybe Steve was teaching them stuff. Now, granted, they didn't have the shield. I want to say they didn't have the shield when they were fugitives. But maybe, Steve already had in the back of his mind that, hey, this is the guy that's one day going to take my mantle. So the training montage and all that stuff, I just remember watching it thinking, like, where did he learn all these moves from? We've never seen Anthony Mackie move. We never seen him move like this before. And I thought it was very cool that they just didn't show this normal guy picking up the shield and, okay, now I can throw the shield. I can do all of these crazy moves. I love that they showed him sort of struggling with it.
Yeah. I got a good chuckle out of that one shot where he throws it and it kind of like whiffs into the tree and bounces off. It was like, it made you feel like, yeah, this is sort of a regular guy figuring it out, And one of the things I've said about Sam before is like, I feel like out of all the Avengers, he might be the guy who's like the most like regular guy in a way.
The most regular guy by far. Yeah, there's nothing regular about Natasha Romanoff, and not Clint either. Whatever happened
Sam
to
has
Budapest.
Exceptional qualities. Don't get me wrong, but in terms of like his life,
he's normal. He's a very normal person. Basically. Yeah. And they drove that home further with this show, just showing him back home with his family and showing how people around him react to him. Like, he's just Sam. He's just Uncle Sam. He's not a super soldier. He doesn't have extreme combat skills. But for what his fighting style is, I think that they really showed throughout the season how it's just kind of grown. Because like you said, with the scene with the shield and the sort of knocking the guy out and just flying through the window, that's top notch stuff. That was great. That's like summer movie level like action sequence right there. Like it wasn't like just some like let's save on the budget for TV action scene. So yeah, that was really cool. Okay, so with Sam, like, too, like, I was wondering throughout the course of this show, I was like, when he gets to the end and he does have the shield, because, like, God, I wanted him to get that shield back. And, like, I think a lot of other people did, too. Like, I was really wondering, like, at the end of this, is he actually going to be, like, the first one to call himself Captain America? Or is that going to be, like, somebody says it and he's, like, doesn't say no? Like, I just wondered, like, what level of, like how strongly he was going to embrace it. Yeah.
And maybe I should have seen it coming that he was going to do it to this level, but like I found it to be cathartic in a way when he finally what was it? He's like walking by and he says somebody says something to him and then he goes, I'm Captain America.
The guy goes, "Who are you?" And he's like, "I'm Captain America." And he says it really matter of factly, like, "Bro, you don't see this shield, you don't see the star on my chest, you didn't see what I just did."
Yeah. And then it was funny when the guy goes, "I thought Captain America was on the moon."
Yeah.
that joke coming back, But I thought it was cool that he did get to the point where he was truly embracing it, you know. And I still think that it wasn't, I got the impression that it's not exactly like it was easy for him. And he kind of mentioned that a little bit in his speech, right? But like, I think he decided, I want to get your impression on this, but like, I think he decided that he felt like he needed to do this and that he was to a place where he could like accept the responsibility of it. So what are your thoughts on like him coming to this place of acceptance and embracing the title of Captain America?
So that's a really good question. I don't think he accepted the mantle on the terms he would have at the start of the show. And so what I mean by that is that when we come into the show, so Sam's a combat veteran, he's in the military, he did 2 tours. He lost his friend Riley. And even, in Captain America, the Winter Soldier, we see him come back and he's still giving back to the people. He's giving back to people like himself. He's doing the support groups, he meets Steve. So I feel like since Captain America: The Winter Soldier, we've seen him kind of go on this journey where, you know, he's a countryman. And he's getting to see all these ugly aspects of the country that he's fought so long to defend, right? And as a superhero, as somebody that goes through the Sokovia Accords on the opposing side, and then, you know, as a black man, which is what, you know, the Falcon and the Winter Soldier show sort of really honed in on with the Isaiah Bradley, you know, angle. So if he had taken the mantle in episode 1, I feel like he would have said it differently in his spirit. Like, I'm Captain America, you know, like I am basically the next iteration of Steve Rogers. But for us to go through the journey from episode 1 to him saying in episode 6, he's saying, I am Captain America, but I am aware of all of the things that have transpired for me to get here. I feel like it was a little bit hard of a decision. I mean, you know, because that one-on-one with him and Isaiah Bradley, you know, where Isaiah Bradley's telling him all the things that happened to him, and he's like, no self-respecting black man would ever pick up that shield. Like, you can kind of see Sam die a little bit inside, you know, because I think at that moment he wanted to do it. And even the scene with like him and Bucky in the middle of the street, you know, like where they're arguing, and the cops pull up, and, you know, they have that whole interaction take place. So in episode 6, when he finally does take up the mantle, I feel like they had really earned that moment. It seemed really powerful. It seemed like a lot of thought had gone into it. And I think what finally made the decision for him, or helped him with that decision, was the conversation that him and Sarah had, you know, back at home in New Orleans, you know, where she's saying, hey, you know, like, you're gonna let another man make a decision for you? And, you know, Sam kind of tells her, like, hey, you know, he has every right to feel the way he feels. Yeah. But at the same time, why would I not do this when I fought for it? So it was awesome. It was awesome.
Yeah. I feel like it, you know, if he had taken up the shield in the first episode and been like, all right, here we go, it wouldn't have been as realistic. It wouldn't have rang.
The fandom wouldn't have gotten behind it, I don't think. There's no way you have him do that and then show us the Carl Lumley, Isaiah Bradley character. There's no way you do that.
Right. So. I mean, I think they use this show to really show us. I think a lot of the audience might have been in like Bucky's shoes in a sense, in that, like, 'cause remember that conversation where they're like playing frisbee with it or in the backyard or whatever, and Bucky hands it back to him after he catches it, and he's like, when Steve told me about the shield and what he was going to do with it, I don't think either of us understood what that really would mean for you to take it up. And I'm sorry. And like, I think that the course of like him getting to that understanding was like a lot of the audience was probably along with that. You know what I mean? And like, I have to say, you know, like, I don't think that I had been able to think through every little like thing that Sam had to consider, and like how it was affecting him and stuff, and so I think that this show did such a good job of taking us along with Sam on that journey, and kind of like laying out, I don't know if the argument on both sides is the right way to put it, but like just sort of like laying out the situation and like what the considerations are and like how that affected everybody. And so like the different sides of that was like Isaiah was also like Bucky, and like what, like him thinking about how Steve gave it to him, and then like Sam's feelings about it, and then you have John Walker, which is sort of like the establishment's answer to it, maybe. Yeah. Right. And so like all these things sort of, you know, interplaying together, and then you have over it all, you know, Sam's journey of like sort of coming to this acceptance of it, and then like this is what he's got to do. Like, I remember after they took the shield from Walker, right, when Sam is there cradling the shield after Bucky like throws it down to him. Yeah. He's like trying to wipe off the blood, and it doesn't come off, and he's like, that was like an emotional moment for him. Yes. And frankly, it was an emotional moment for me because A, this show has done a really good job of that. And B, like, you know, I think I've been a fan of Captain America since, you know, Chris Evans did such a good job with that role. And like, I actually, you know, I've told other people this, like, when I first heard they were going to make a Captain America movie before they made that first one, I didn't think it could work. Like
No.
I was maybe a little pessimistic, but somehow they made that character work, right? And all that stuff. And I just thought, I thought the world of like Steve in particular. And so maybe partially that's why this show had a lot of resonance for me. But like seeing Sam go through this whole journey has just been like really effective. And I think, and this is another thing I wanted to ask you, like, so I've talked about how I think one of the things the MCU in general does really well is it uses this like emotional realism like to kind of ground like all this crazy comic book stuff. And that's one of the things that I think keys people into like all this MCU stuff so well. And then particularly when we're talking about this show, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, like, you can imagine like a corny version of this show where maybe he picks up the shield right away, or maybe it's just more about the action, or, whatever you can say. But like, what do you think about this idea that like the emotional realism is what really brings it home and makes it work, particularly for like this show?
Yeah, so I mean that's what Marvel has consistently done so well, right? And if somebody wants to see an example of what you mean by how good intentions wanting to do something similar can come off corny, just watch some of the CW DC shows, right? And I love those shows. I love those shows. But you can watch some of those shows, not naming any shows in particular, and you can see that there's something that they really want to get into emotionally, right? They really want to get into it. They really want to get in depth with it, but they just don't have the time to do it. They're working on a 30 to 45 minute time span, and you just don't have that ability. So the masterful filmmaking and what they've been able to do with all of their stuff, using this show as a prime example, is great. Because I mean, the levity it takes in a scene to be able to show John Walker and Bucky and Sam, all fighting, and doing their whole thing, and to have that emotional moment of John Walker dealing with his loss, and then saying, okay, let's go to work, and them to have that big powerful fight, and then Bucky picks up the shield after they've knocked him out. He kind of drops it, next to Sam, and he's like, hey, here, we just had to do all of this for you because of a decision you made, right? But then for
that
2
look
episodes,
on his face to me, when Bucky dropped the shield, he was like, "Don't let this happen again, bro."
Yes.
Basically.
Yep. So look at the journey from that moment to Bucky telling him in that at that later point, like, hey, you know what? I didn't understand what you were gonna deal with. I didn't understand that there were nuances to this, so I'm sorry. But then in the very next scene, you got Torres, kind of giving jabs at Bucky, so I really love the way that this show could be very, very serious and on a dime's notice be very, very funny. I think that takes really I think it takes really masterful filmmaking to be able to do that, to earn it, and for the fans to pick up on it too.
Yeah, the writing and every aspect of the production, I think they did like a super job. So, okay, so do you have anything else to say specifically about Sam and his journey before we move on to the next big topic?
I think what I will say is just that I'm really looking forward. I don't know if outside of the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, if we never get this show, say we get WandaVision and they go straight to Loki, I don't know if anybody cares too much for the Falcon character going into the next phase, because they're getting ready to introduce all of these other great people. We're going to be getting She-Hulk. We're going to be getting, She-Hulk. We're getting Kamala Khan. We just got all the characters that WandaVision brought in. So I think for them to cap his journey like this, I'm really interested to see if he's going to be a leader of sorts in the next big group we get.
That's interesting, because what's the next big team up movie going to be, right? They haven't announced that, right? So
they haven't announced it.
Yeah, it kind of depends. I have heard that the next Captain Marvel movie is going to be similar to like Civil War, in the sense that you have a whole bunch of people coming. It's like, Avengers Light, maybe, kind of a thing. But we'll see.
Yep.
Okay, so next, so let's talk about Carly really quick.
Okay.
So I'm wondering, what are your thoughts about Carly and her Super Smashers during this episode? I will say I did find my sympathy evaporating once she started talking about just like killing everyone.
Yeah.
Even though they made her character very empathetic in the sense that you can understand where she's coming from.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering about your thoughts about her, and then also, maybe more generally, like how do you rank her as like an MCU villain? Like where do you put her like alongside like any of the other villains that we've seen in the MCU?
So, man, I wasn't familiar with Erin Kellyman before this, but she did a really, really good job, right? Because you got to look at the level of talent she's on screen with, right? Sebastian Stan in his own right has a huge following, and everybody knows he has acting chops. If you go back to some of the stuff he was in prior, there are a lot of instances you've seen him on screen where he may be the only person doing a pretty good job at acting. And then Anthony Mackie is a guy that when I was in 7th grade in middle school, I was going to the theaters to see him in movies that he was leading. Right. So this is a pretty serious guy too, And then you got who else? Daniel Bruhl is, in my opinion, one of the best villains the MCU has put on screen for us, right?
So too, yeah.
Yeah, so you got all of these people who are amazing, and you have this young actor who you're asking to come in and be the main person. And I think she did a really good job. I can't say honestly at any point that I lost sympathy for her. And what I mean by that is that she gets into some really gruesome stuff right at the end. She's like, we're going to kill you, and we're going to kill you, and we're going to kill you, and we might kill you too. But they spent the entire 6 episodes letting us know that the super soldier serum changes people, and if it doesn't necessarily change you, it amplifies the negative parts of you, right? So I feel like we saw a really timely progression throughout the 6 episodes, where she started out with a really just cause, and even Anthony Mackie, Falcon, brings levity to that, saying, hey, like, I get your cause, I just don't like how you're doing it. And you just see her progressively throughout the episodes get more and more and more extreme. So when we get to this episode, and even her other companion Flag Smashers are looking at her like, at one point she's like, one world, and they all kind of looking at her like, bro.
I'm not sure we want to. Yeah.
she has to say it again. She has to say again, one world, and they kind of all come together. So I like the Carly character. I like that they decided to take a character from the comics. There was the whole gender swap thing that took place, I liked it. I really liked what they did. I really liked it. And I feel like she landed exactly the way she had to land. And, and I feel like her death was meaningful. I feel like her death was meaningful in that it gave Falcon something, or it gave Captain America something to be able to stand on even more in his speech, where he's like, hey, she died to stop you. So clearly you're doing something wrong. So.
Yeah, I think she was the villain or the antagonist that the show needed in a way.
Yeah.
And I think that, to what you're saying about her acting chops, I think that, it says a lot, in addition to like just standing toe to toe with all these other actors, that like when they position her as the leader of this group, and she's standing there making a speech, like when she was going through that thing where she was like, oh, worst case, we'll just have to kill them all. And they have that hesitation, but then she convinces them. Like, at least I was easily bought that she was their leader and that they followed her, right? So like,
yeah.
And she's really young, and that's not saying anything negative about that, but that's just like normally, like if you can imagine another actor, that young, who maybe couldn't quite sell that they were the charismatic leader of this, movement. You know what I'm saying? So
yep. And there was no point that I didn't feel like she was the leader. I always felt that she was the leader. She was the head of the movement, and you even get to see her sort of mature into that role from the first episode to the finale.
Yeah, and I think for me, when I think about her compared to other villains in the MCU, I think it's kind of hard to compare in a lot of ways. And I don't always like to do like rankings, but I did feel that she was a real person, and that she had realistic motivations, and like I could empathize with her even if I could not condone the things that she was doing and the way she decided to carry out her fight,
Mm-hmm.
But and I think that's one of the things that can make a really good villain. And so for those reasons, like I as a villain, I like her a lot more than characters like Malekith, like like Ronan maybe, because like you have the villains that are like, I will destroy the world for no reason, and and then just to be evil, and then and then you have people like Carly who have these realistic sort of motivations, and I just find that to be like a lot more interesting as a villain.
They have gotten better at their villain crafting, right? Because I mean, like you said, you look at somebody like Ronan, or you look at somebody like Justin Hammer, and it's like, okay, you're like, you're the patsy that was needed, right? But then you progress to people like Zemo, and we start getting the Killmongers of the world, right?
And.
We get so much more screen time with the people in these Disney Plus shows, so even Agatha from WandaVision, we get so much more screen time, so they have to find a way to not make them stale on us, because we're seeing them more than we're seeing the villains from the movies, and so far I think they've done a good job of that.
Yeah, and like what you said about Zemo being one of the greatest villains they've given us so far, I got to agree. And I think that they developed him even just like the tiniest bit further in this than they did before, and I even feel like this is not the last that we've seen of him in a way.
Oh no, he'll be back.
yeah. So maybe we'll talk about that a little bit more at the end. But so let's move on and talk about our next topic. So let's talk about John Walker for a minute.
Okay.
So John Walker shows up and he's ready to take revenge on Carly with his garage welded shield, but it doesn't end up going down quite the way I think he planned. So what do you make of him in this episode? Like, what are your thoughts about him? So what do you make of him in the episode overall, and what are your thoughts about him in that moment where he chooses to save those people in the truck over taking revenge by killing Carly, because he kind of had that choice because she was right there. The truck was right there. So like, what are your thoughts on that?
So, I really like the John Walker character, right? And Wyatt Russell has done such a good job that even outside of the show, we know that he's been getting, sort of like, crazy death threats and really bad things people, are sending his way. So obviously he's portrayed this character really well, right? And it goes on to build on the better job they're doing of villain crafting, right? Because can we truly say, now in the comics he is. In the comics, U.S. Agent is a villain. I mean, this guy does crazy stuff. He's Homelander levels of evil, right? And maybe we'll see him get there later on in like, other properties and maybe the Thunderbolt show, wherever, Contessa Valentina decides to take him. But when he shows up in this episode, I really thought that Sam and Bucky were going to have a battle on two fronts. I thought they were going to have to deal with the Flag Smashers, and I thought that they were going to have to deal with John Walker, right? And so then he shows up, with his Home Depot shield, and he's like, Morgenthau, it's about to go down. And then Carly says quite possibly the worst thing she could say. She's like, hey man, sorry about killing your friend. His death doesn't really mean anything. And I'm like, oh, he's about to hurt you. And then then he throws the shield and she kind of kicks it. And they gave us this really cool moment of everybody looking at the shield, right? That she's just kicked, and it's laying on his side, and you see all like the weld rivets and stuff like that. And she's kind of looking at it, and he's looking at it, and everybody's like, this isn't the shield, you know?
Yeah.
So his arc isn't my favorite of the show because I kind of wanted to see him end on a more nefarious note, you know. I didn't necessarily like to see the whole buddy cop thing at the end of the show where, like, him and Bucky, catch the remaining Flag Smashers with the app, and they make sure to show you he's like patting Bucky on the back, right? And when Sam's giving his speech, he's kind of there, like kind of nodding, and when he's done, him and Sam give each other the head nod. I didn't necessarily care for that because I wanted them to keep him sort of a heel, if that makes sense, to sort of leave that open for wherever they take the show forward. But I do see I do see why they did it the way they did it, you know, because you need to care about him in some sort of way. And if we were going to have a redemption or arc in the show, I'm sure fans would have liked to see him redeemed more than seeing somebody like Backtrack redeemed, or, you know, the Sherry character redeemed.
I didn't see a redemption arc for Batroc in this, but yeah.
No, I didn't. But I will say this real quick, and this is kind of off topic. I do love the fact that they stay very true to the comics. In the comics, Batroc is one of the world's leading hand-to-hand combatants, right? So I love the fact that thus far in the MCU, the only person who's ever been able to best Batroc that we've seen on screen is Steve Rogers. You know, he kind of whips Falcon in the first episode, and he's kind of whipping Falcon in this episode, you know, and Sam just kind of has to take off. He doesn't really beat him. You know, he just kind of has to take off, you know. So.
I kind of like that because, you know, it like you said, it keeps him more true to the comics, but also like, you know, I think it shows that Sam still has a little ways to go before he reaches his full potential, right? It kind of felt like that to me. And you know what? Even when Steve fought him, he actually had to like try. It wasn't just like swat him down and move on to the next thing, you know. So that was cool. Walker. Yeah, we were talking about Walker. So, like, you know what? So, with Walker, you know, I have heard a lot of people online talking about how, oh, like, he had his redemption and now he's redeemed. And I actually don't see it that way.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, so I want to get your reaction to this, but here's what I'm thinking. Like, he did make the right decision in that big moment, right? Like, because, I mean, I don't see him as, like, this black and white, like, he's a villain now. Like, I feel like he is a very damaged individual who wants to be a hero and do the right thing, but oftentimes he's kind of, like, too damaged to, like, have it within himself to make those right decisions. And so, he did make the right decision there, and I think that was, you know, a good moment for him, but I don't feel like that's totally redeemed him. You know, because I feel like he's still unstable. You know, he like at that. Remember that like moment at the end where like Val is leaving and she's like, "Don't call me Val," and then he has that like he like his head like glitches out for a second. You know, like he's still a damaged individual.
Yeah,
and I feel like at the end here. Let me see. I made a couple of notes so I don't forget things. I don't get the impression that he's actually changed much.
No, I know. I think, you know, they sort of they give us in the show, they give us a very consistent character twitch that he has. You know, he kind of does this and then he kind of throws his head to the side and he's like, you know, let's go to work, right? So while the show ended on a good note with him celebrating, you know, with his wife and all of that, I do expect to, you know, I don't think he's necessarily changed. I just think that they decided to leave off on a good note with him, you know, just sort of a feel good moment. But I think we can expect to see darker stuff.
It was, but I mean, also his reaction there, where he's like, "I'm back, I'm back." Oh, you know, all this. Yeah. Like, I felt like he's still really focused on his ego and his status in a way that, and he has like, and here's the other thing. Like, I feel like there's this. It's almost like the show is contrasting him to Bucky in a way because they're both soldiers who have been through a lot of crap, right? Tons. And whereas Bucky's like doing the work to heal and to better himself and to climb out of this, like, you know, damage that he has in himself. Like, Walker's not doing that. He's almost going the other direction and doubling down. Like, no, nothing's wrong. Like, I have to be a hero and like all this stuff. And so, like, remember the moment when he's down on the ground and he's got his shield, which is pretty banged up by then, and they're all like kicking him or whatever, and he like looks at his metal that he like welded to the inside of the shield. Like, actually in that one scene where he was putting it together, I thought maybe he was gonna like melt it down like into the shield, but he actually just kept it there so he could look at it. And I thought, oh, wait a minute, like I'm thinking like maybe in that moment, like he's thinking about that experience, because I think he's also kind of like reliving a moment of trauma or something in that moment, right?
Yeah.
And I wonder if there's something about that that kind of helped him get to the right place where he decided to like help the people instead of just going off and like killing Carly or whatever. Like
that's
what are
a
your
very
thoughts
good
about
point.
this?
That's a very good point, and I hadn't really thought about it in those terms. It's very interesting that you say that. I hadn't really thought about it as them juxtaposing Bucky to the John Walker character. And now that I think about it, I think you're right. I think that's what they did spend a little bit of time doing. And when they show the scenes of him like sort of putting the shield together, and they show him, you know, sort of welding the Medal of Honor to the shield. We had already seen clips from the trailer of him arriving with that shield, so I was wondering, like, you know, did they CGI out the metal, you know, for the trailer so we wouldn't see it and know that it wasn't the shield? But you know, in that scene where he kind of sees it on the back, I was like, okay, cool. You know, I think it was like you said. I think it was supposed to be sort of a grounding mechanism for him. I think, you know, he knows that he goes off the rails a bit, and I think it was meant to be sort of like a grounding rod. Like, hey, you know, this is who you are. This is who
like
you are.
It reminded me of that conversation he had with Lamar at like the table or whatever, which must have been before or right around the time that he took the serum, where he's talking to Lamar, and he's like. And Lamar's like, you always make the right decisions in the heat of battle. You got these medals. And he was like, yeah, to remind me of the worst day of my life. And I was reminded of that conversation because, yeah, I think you're right. It was like a grounding mechanism for him. It kind of, maybe he put it there to try and remind himself of what's important, you know?
Yeah.
And so, and this was also a show that didn't go like, it wasn't like things are not black and white in this show, right?
No,
in terms of the morality of it. You know, and so I think it was appropriate to not just make him an all-out villain, like he's going to try and murder Sam and Bucky, or whatever, and where they left him more of in a gray area at the end, I guess.
Yeah.
But so that's kind of how I've been thinking about it, and so let's see. So they did call him U.S. agent, and they gave him the black and red uniform, right?
Yes.
Which doesn't he have that in the comics, the black and red uniform like that?
Yeah, so in the comics he has the black outfit, he has the black costume, and his shield ends up being black, sort of around the edge and around the middle. And where Captain America has a star, he sort of has the letters US. So it's very comic accurate in that respect. I didn't like the choice of lighting that they used in that scene, because when he walked out, you know, and he's like, you know, he has to say it vocally, so maybe they knew as well. You know, he says, hey, you know, it's the same thing, but it's just black. I couldn't really see much of a visual difference. It was
a pretty dark blue before, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was already a pretty dark blue, and you know, they kind of had him standing in front of the windows with a lot of, you know, natural light coming in. So I don't know if, you know, maybe my sight isn't the best, but I really couldn't tell a difference. I think maybe they should have lit that scene a bit different so that we could see the contrast.
Yeah, it was, but it was like exactly the same as the other outfit, except black instead of blue.
He's just black, man. It's like, okay, I'll take your word for it.
And I like the way he delivered that line where he's like, it's the same except black. Yeah. So that was interesting. Okay, so last big question about John Walker. There was something interesting I thought about how. The last we see of his like DIY shield there was that it was all broken and flimsy and like, and you know, and like he tossed it down and like discarded it. Like I feel like there's maybe some level of symbolism in there that like he like when he tried to hold the symbol that it didn't quite hold up, you know, something about that. Did you have any thoughts on that or reaction to it when you saw it, or like what do you think about that?
I think they were very heavy-handed with the symbolism, because very, very close to that moment. I can't remember exactly the sequencing, but very close to that moment, you know, we see Sam and we see Bucky and John Walker kind of standing there, you know, in awe of Sam, you know, because the truck's about to fall, and you know, Sam kind of catches it right. And you know, when I saw that, I was like, okay, how is Sam doing this? Because he doesn't have superhuman strength, and maybe he's just using the downward thrust from the jetpack. But then, you know, you kind of see, you know, the smaller, you know, gadgets that are coming out of the wings to assist him in that regard. So, you know, and I think at that. one of his upgrades, and he had the shield on his back. So I think that the symbolism was very heavy handed, as you said, to sort of show you that Walker tried to wield the shield, and we see what he did with it, and then he tried to make his own symbol, and we see what happened to that. Because one of my favorite scenes of his interactions with the shield is when he's fighting one of the flag smashers and the guy's just like punching it and he's just like denting it up, and on the other side of the shield, John Walker is looking at it and he's seeing the dent, like, wow, this didn't happen with the vibranium one. I like that we don't see him pick that shield back up,
and
I would imagine that at some point in the future, we'll see him get another shield that's maybe made out of, vibranium or adamantium.
Yeah, you said in the comics he has one, right?
Yes, he in the comics he does have one. I'm not sure what it's made out of.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, with Wakanda, sitting on most of the world's vibranium, and the whole significance of Cap's shield being, hey, this is one of the only pieces of vibranium that exists outside of Wakanda. I think it would be sort of cheap for them to just show him the next time on our screen and say, hey, we got you another circular piece of flying vibranium.
I kind of don't want him to have a vibranium shield,
No.
I don't feel like he deserves it.
But now that Disney owns all the Fox properties, and there are whispers of a possible Wolverine series coming out. Maybe in whatever medium we see John Walker next, maybe in like the Thunderbolt show, we see Wolverine and we see introduction of adamantium.
Yeah, adamantium. Because that could happen, right? Maybe he gets an adamantium shield or something, right?
Yep.
I'd be interested to see in the MCU how they differentiate between those two metals, what that means and all that.
Yep.
That's just kind of interesting. So, John Walker, I think he's a really great character to be in the MCU, and I think that there's a lot of stuff that they can do with him moving forward. And he's been kind of I've kind of like loved to hate John Walker in this show. He's been like my favorite punching bag because I've just been I just really wanted to just punch him in the face. Not that I would do that in real life, but he's been infuriating, But okay, so that's John Walker. Do you have any final thoughts about him before we move on?
Whatever they choose to do with him next, I will be excited to see it. I hope that they build on what they did with him in this show. So I hope the next time we see him, it's not a complete deviation from sort of what we saw as his origin story here, So if we see him in a Thunderbolt show, I hope we see him, with his wife, I hope we still see him sort of dealing with losing his best friend. I hope we see him having those character struggles. If the next time we see him, he's just a mustache twirling villain, I feel like that would not be doing justice to what they established. So
yeah, I totally agree with that. So, okay, so let's talk about Bucky real quick.
Okay.
So first of all, what was your reaction to his confession to Mr. Nakajima? I know we talked about it just a little bit at the top of the show, but how did you react to that? What did you think?
Man, it was earned. I want to use that word again, and I want to say it was earned. And I think them not giving us a full, exposition of it was earned too. So I think them just choosing to show us him coming out and saying it, and a little bit of Mr. Nakajima's response, and then just showing Bucky leaving. I think it was very fitting. And for us to have seen the entire death scene of his son, it's just as impactful for us, because we as the audience can say, hey, I don't think I would have forgiven that guy too. But you're not exactly going to yell at a guy with a metal arm that's sitting in your
right. What are you going to do?
So his character development in this show was awesome. If they do decide to go forth with another season, I would maybe expect for him to be more the singular focus of the show. I know, the show is the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but I feel like this season was Sam's coming out party. Featuring Bucky, and maybe in the next time that we see them, it'll be Bucky's coming out party, because they have a lot of places they could go with the Bucky character, right? Isaiah Bradley mentions how, when they met, on that island in that bar, he kind of beat the brakes off Bucky and took half his arm, right? We could still get a flashback scene of that, next
That's
season.
true.
I would love to see that, and we could also, maybe, I don't know in what medium, maybe we get flashbacks to his time in Wakanda. He was there for a while before Infinity War. So maybe we see some of his outings as the White Wolf.
Right.
There was a part of me in this episode. We know that, he asked Ayo for a suit for Sam. That's what we all assumed. And I was in the back of my mind, and this is just fan theory crafting. I was wondering, like, maybe that wasn't the only suit that he got from Ayo. Maybe he was also
right.
like, hey, can you bring me that suit, my suit from under my bunk, in my hut, and he was gonna show up in his White Wolf outfit, so I was kind of hoping for that, and I hope that we do see him at some point, maybe in Captain America 4. We see him in that White Wolf outfit. So
yeah, that would be cool. And I think I totally agree with you that this was more about like Sam's coming out party, the way you put it, instead of like and then Bucky was just also there, kind of.
Yeah, he was
but
there.
I think that at the same time, this was like the most development we've gotten out of Bucky since we've seen him in the MCU.
Yeah.
And he really did come a long way from being a very, super damaged individual trying to recover from his Winter Soldier days, to this place where now he's got a real friend in Sam, and he's a lot more at peace than he was. I mean, I'm not going to say he doesn't still have ghosts and, he doesn't still have some stuff to deal with, but like he's come a long way. And I think actually a lot of that's because of Sam and because of Sam's family and community. Because, when I think it was episode 5, they had the whole fixing the boat montage and all that.
Yep. Yeah.
That was so important to Bucky's character, I think. And part of it was when he finishes helping with the boat and he's like, okay, I guess I'm going to get a hotel. And Sam's like, you're not going to set me up like that, right? And he's like, you can sleep on my couch. Like, don't worry about it. But like, if you think about it, that's probably the most like real, like human interaction that he's had in like 80 years. Where people are not just like running from him screaming or, you know what I mean? Or trying to hunt him down
run at
or
him.
He's defending himself or whatever. Cause like, and Sam even says at one point, he says like, they don't care if you got 16 toes or you got an arm coming out of your forehead or, whatever he says. It's like, that's kind of a big deal for Bucky, right? Because he's used to being, in a situation where people are like afraid of him or they're really wary of him because of his past or whatever it is, but he gets an actual chance to like be around people who just treat him as another guy. And like Sarah even is like, not pulling any punches with him or Sam, when she's like, you guys don't know what you're doing with this pump, like get out of here and like all that stuff. Like that was really cool. And also I've said before, like, he flirts with Sarah a little bit in that one episode, which is kind of getting under Sam's skin, which is part of the reason that he's doing it, right? But like at the same time, like if you think about it in comparison to that date he was on in like the first or second episode with that bartender woman, like she's asking him a couple of these questions, like how old are you? And he's like 106. And she asks him about why he wears the gloves, and he says no circulation. And technically he's not actually lying when he gives those answers.
100%.
But that's like so uncomfortable for him. Whereas I'm pretty sure Sarah knows exactly who he is, right?
She knows exactly who he is and what he's about.
She don't care, She's dressing him down just the way she would anybody. So I think that that's all just to say that like I think that was a really healthy situation for him to be in, and that really helped him on his journey. Like, what do you think about that?
So to go off of what you've already said, let's juxtapose the two scenes of Bucky waking up, right? So in the first episode, we see him waking up from having the dream or the remembrance of, killing Mr. Nakajima's son, right? But then, he wakes up, he's in a cold sweat, and he's laying on the floor in his Matchbox apartment, right? But then you juxtapose that with the scene of him waking up, to Sam's nephews playing with the shield, right? And he's like, he's like, hey, and he just kind of looks over at me, throws the peace sign, right? You can kind of see how much peace he's in. So I really like that. I think that was the familial interaction he needed, and I was I like that they ended the show with him there in New Orleans with Anthony Mackie and with his family. I mean, like it was sort of a cold close, but it was very heartwarming. Like Anthony Mackie's just looking off into the distance, man. And Bucky's just there. He kind of slaps him on the back. So I really like that, and I feel like it's what his character needed. The funny thing about his courtship throughout this entire show is I loved how it just sort of turned into humor, right? Because when he's talking to the bartender from that one spot, he's just telling her the truth, like I would imagine in 60, to 100 years, the area of courting has changed a bit, right?
A little bit, right? Yeah,
just a little bit. So I like that you see that awkwardness with him where he's sort of trying to put on his front. But then, like you said, when he's talking with Sarah and Sarah knows everything about him, he's just like, hey, I'm Sarah. So
I love how he's like, hey, I'm Bucky, and she just like smiles at him. Sam's like, come on.
That was really good. And the last scene that we see of him, sort of standing outside of the bar, and he's looking at Mr. Nakajima, and the bartender is next to Mr. Nakajima as well. I thought that was cool because it kind of gives us, an idea or a tease that maybe, somewhere down the road, that's a relationship, he'll be able to return to.
Maybe. I mean, I think that is possible, but I feel like in that moment, Bucky was just kind of like checking in on him to make sure he wasn't
that's
like,
true.
Spiraling ever downward. But I think what happened was kind of like what Sam had told him was like, he gave that man closure. Right?
Yes.
Like, you don't expect in that conversation Nakajima to be like, oh, come in for a hug, buddy. It was hard for you to kill my son. No, but like now the guy at least knows what happened to his son. So he can have that closure. And I think he was actually doing a shot of sake or something in that at the bar.
Was he?
Yeah, I think he was actually. And so and the bartender gave him a little smile, and then and then he walked off. But that was a great bookend for him at the end of the show, I guess.
It was that in the bit with the therapist was pretty cool. Of him giving her the book with all the crossed out names. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think she did really help him, even if it was still necessary. I feel like it was still necessary for him to have that conversation with Sam when they're playing frisbee with the shield, where he says, "Look, if you want to climb out of this hell you're in, you gotta do the work. It's not about avenging; it's about being of service to these people, that you've affected, and you have to be able to go and do the hard work of like giving them closure."
Yep,
right?
100%. And just to mention, one person who also helps and sort of pushes Bucky's development forward, in the show is Zemo. Zemo tells him before the Wakandans cart him off. Zemo tells him, "Hey, you and I, we have no quarrel. I took the time to cross my name out in your book too. So you and I are cool too. So that was just another step."
Yeah, that's right. And I think it's also interesting looking at it now that it's over when Zemo said, I've decided not to kill you, James. And of course, in that moment, Bucky's like, imagine my relief because I got you. But at the same time, there's that scene with the Flag Smashers at the end where they get put into that police van and the one cop is like, one world, one people. Right?
Yeah.
And I kind of got the impression they were like going to try and get them out, maybe.
Yes,
the movement was going to try and free them, but then it blows up. Whoops, excuse me. But then it blows up, and then it pans to this. I did not see this coming. It was the butler pilot dude of Zemo sitting there doing it, and I was like, "Oh my god, he did it!"
That was great.
And then awesome. Zemo hearing about it on the radio at the raft, he gives a little smile, and he goes back to reading his Machiavelli book. So that was like one more, because they had this like theme of like, do the ends justify the means or whatever, and how different characters deal with that. So he's back to reading his Machiavelli. I thought that was really interesting because then it made me think, holy cow, he probably could have had that guy like sneak up and kill Bucky at some point, or he could have done something, right?
Easily.
With his vast resource. So that was interesting, and that also is part of, I think, what makes Zemo a really interesting villain is that he does actually have some principles.
Yep.
You know, he has done some really evil stuff, but go ahead.
And he's resourceful. He is incredibly resourceful, right? Because remember how we see that Butler moving. You know, he's hunched over, he's barely walking, right? So how did he manage to get a car bomb, you know, on his police van? Like how did that even happen?
Yeah, so I mean, you know, I could make some guesses, but like that was but that's really interesting for me to think about now, because also like Zemo has recognized that. I think part of it is that like this was done to Bucky. He was not a person who was like, give me the super soldier serum. Yeah. You know? But that also kind of suggests the question of like, is Zemo going to be making a play against Walker too? And like, is there going to be any fallout from that? So that's kind of, you have any thoughts on that?
Well, you know, so now I don't know if they've announced this already or if it's pure fan speculation. I think they did announce it when they were announcing, you know, Thunderheart and Secret Invasion, but there is going to be a Thunderbolt show, right? So we know that we'll be seeing Thunderbolt Ross again. And I would imagine, you know, with Zemo now being at the raft, and I'm assuming John Walker will either end up at the raft, or maybe Thunderbolt Ross is one of the interested parties that Contessa Valentina is talking about, you know, when she tells him like, hey, you know, you've got a lot of people interested in you. You know, so I think that we are going to see Daniel Bruhl and Wyatt Russell on the screen again together. And I think that's going to be one of the conflicts they have, you know, like I think that Zemo is going to be like, you want me to work with this guy that goes against everything that I believe in, you know? And in some ways, Zemo sort of aided in John Walker's, you know, downfall, you know? So, I mean, I think that's going to be their conflict for the future, you know? So
I think that's going to be real interesting, and I could also see it being like, you know, them coming to Zemo for information or, you know, something like that, and they're like, well, you're going to have to work with Walker on this, and he, you know, we know how he feels about that, right? But at the same time, Zemo is smart enough to be like, sure, I'll do that, wink, wink, you know, and have some plans, you know, in motion. Like I could easily see something like that.
You know, and hey, man, Zemo is one of the smartest people we've seen thus far. One of the smartest and most conniving people we've seen in the MCU thus far. And Walker did hit the guy in the head with a shield, so I'm sure I'm sure he hasn't forgiven him for that.
Yeah, you know, since we're talking about Zemo, like I gotta say, like I could easily see in a future either, you know, one of these Disney Plus shows or maybe one of the like Avengers movies or something coming up where, you know, something goes down, because you know that they're putting people into this raft like as the years go by, because the first look we got at it, I think, was at the end of Civil War, right? And that was some years ago now, so you know they're probably putting people in here like here and there over across all these years, and we're just not hearing about it yet. So I could imagine a situation where in the future something happens and like the inmates get out or something, you know, something like that. And then Zemo is either like part of why that happened or the guy they all leave behind. And then the heroes come and are like, tell us what you know. And it's like this uneasy alliance again or something like that. Like I could see either one of those happen. You know what I'm saying?
I could too. I really could.
Okay. So I did want to talk about sort of this like friendship that's developed between Sam and Bucky just a little bit. Like I think they actually seem to be close now. Like they had this fight together, they kind of helped each other along the way, not only in like the fighting part of it, but like with each other's like personal journeys too, I feel like. And so I'm just wondering, like, what stands out to you about their relationship, and will Bucky continue to flirt with Sam's sister?
I sincerely believe Bucky will continue to flirt with Sam's sister. I definitely believe that. Or, you know, and even if nothing is meant by it, I think the two of them will continue to sort of mess with Sam by doing it. But man, when you think about just the correlation, we think about the journey that they've been on since Captain America: The Winter Soldier, right? And all the way up until some of the more recent movies, they've always had this tension, right? Like what I always think about. What I always think about when I think about their relationship is the car scene, right? Where Sharon stole Cap's shield, and like Sharon and Steve are kind of standing there at the back of the car, and Bucky's like, hey, man, can you let your seat up? And Sam's like, no. And so Bucky kind of moves to like the other side of the back seat, and he's full on Winter Soldier at this point, right? Like he could just snap Sam in two. And just another example of masterful filmmaking and levity, right? We go from the seriousness of that scene to Steve and sharing that kiss, and you look back at the car, you just kind of see the both of them in the car, like yeah.
To me, that moment you just mentioned right there was like the genesis of this show. Because it was like those guys, like it was funny because they kind of did hate each other in the beginning.
Yes. Yeah.
Like I remember that moment when Spider-Man basically kicks their butts and they're both laying there and Sam's like, I hate you.
Yeah.
But it was like that. And then that moment when when it looks back and they're both smiling because Steve's getting that kiss is like, to me, that was like a really great moment that kind of led into the show maybe.
Yeah, and even the first, I don't know if it was the first, but one of their fight scenes that they share, where they're on a roof and Bucky's still Winter Soldier, he still sort of has the cowl, and they're fighting, and Sam goes to fly off, and Bucky just kind of grabs him and says, hey, where are you going? And slams him down on the roof. It's they've been building towards this for a very long time, and Paul Bettany has mentioned in interviews that Kevin Feige told him when he signed up to be Jarvis that about the idea for WandaVision. And I mean, that was a very long time ago, right? Like that was a very long time ago. So if that's true, I completely believe that, from the very first time we saw Bucky, Feige had this idea of the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. You know
what, Feige, man, I think that guy really thinks ahead, and he is. I mean, the MCU's a big success due in no small part to him, right? So
yeah,
I got to give it up for Kevin Feige, and that's why, like, when I hear about these new projects now that we're like 11, 12 years into the MCU or whatever now, like when I have doubts, I'm like ready to give them the benefit of the doubt.
Always.
Right? Because of the strength of what they've been able to do so far. So that's a really good point. Yeah, they're thinking ahead. So so that scene with them together at the end of the docks, we did kind of mention it just a little bit, but I gotta say, I really love that scene. Like the music, like made you feel good,
it was perfect.
And like they're having like I don't know if it was like they were having like a cookout or something.
Yeah,
they're having like a nice little get together, and it's after they've gone through the battle and all that, and I just really enjoy it. And you see Bucky there like holding up his arm and like 5 kids hanging on, and he's like,
hanging off of
and I it's funny. The other funny thing that I noticed in that shot the second time I watched the episode is if you look on the left of the screen, there's this little girl standing there looking up at him like she is not impressed. And
no,
I don't know, it gave me like this extra chuckle, So
yeah, I noticed that the first time around.
Yeah, just check it. I mean, it's just there for a second, but like I found it to be real fun, and like I just think there's something really nice about how he's in like a normal situation with normal people, where he can have like a healthy like conversation and like human interaction with people, which you imagine he hasn't quite had for like, I don't know, 80 years or something.
A very long time.
Because I feel like that's got to be, I mean, he's barely had like that kind of like interaction with people for like ever, So.
And I think the show, something that I thought about just this morning actually, is the show in the same way. So throughout the show, they constantly put Steve Rogers over, right? They want you to know that there's only ever been one person in history to take that serum that turned out good for the most part. They really do their due diligence of putting Steve Rogers over, right? And then they tell you about all of the iterations that have come after and how they failed miserably. But when you look at Bucky Barnes and you look at his situation, you take into consideration that from the moment he took the serum, he was being mind controlled by Hydra, right? And he was being made to do all of these terrible things. But look at him now. You know, since he's been freed of that, you know, they don't so much as say it because you can't glorify somebody that has you can't glorify somebody that has the hit list that Bucky has, you know, whether he was the Winter Soldier or not. But I feel like it is insinuated very strongly that Bucky is of the same character of Steve Rogers. Look at him now, you know, and they don't necessarily say it, but it's there.
Yeah, you know, he has that more complicated history that, you know, that you alluded to. But at the same time, you know, like, I think that he and Steve were best friends for a reason. You know, I think that they were kindred spirits. And granted, Bucky has had to deal with a lot of stuff that Steve hadn't had to deal with. And so he's got that more checkered past, you know. But at the same time, you're right. Now that he's healing, I think you're seeing, I think you're right. You're seeing in him that he's got that good in him. And I think that's why, I think that's one big reason why Zemo was like, yeah, I'm not going to kill you.
Yeah, you're fine. You know. You're fine.
Yeah,
just you know, just that acknowledgement that's there, and I think that also that's something that they don't outright say. A lot of people believe that they've been constantly nerfing Bucky since Winter Soldier. We never really see him be as dominant in hand-to-hand combat, but I don't think that is that we don't see him being as dominant. I think we just don't see him being as brutal. I think we don't see him act with as much carelessness for just human life, you know?
Yeah, so totally agree. He's not just like, all right, I'm going to kill you in the most efficient way possible, and then you, and then you, and then you, and you. It's not like he's going for the throat every time. It's like he's fighting to win, but not to like kill you or maim you anymore.
Yes. 100%.
Right? Yeah, that's a good point. I think that's a really good point. You know, because one imagines he could easily like rip out somebody's throat or whatever with his you know, with his metal arm, but that's not who he is now.
Yeah, their entire central nervous system in one piece.
Like in the Predator movies, right? When it like pulls out somebody's spine or whatever. Yeah. No. So I'm glad he didn't do that. Okay, so I want to move on and talk about Sam's speech at the end and his big moment, right? Yeah. So this was like obviously like a big culmination of the show, I think. And first of all, he comes down, he like flies down with Carly's body with like his wings out. And there was something about that shot that felt like very iconic, like almost like it was lifted directly from like a religious like painting or something. You know, there was something really impactful about that. And to me, like maybe like the underlying like sort of feeling that you get from, or that you can get from that image was like, that's like him, his like savior like pose or something. I'm not saying he was like posing for a picture. I'm just saying like, there's something really uplifting and like impactful about that image. Did that strike you? And like, what did you think about that as he was coming down?
I think that's the best shot that we get of him, you know, in his new regalia. I think that's the best shot we get of that outfit, you know, as he's sort of landing, you know, with the wings outstretched, and, you know, as he lands, they sort of go in, and, you know, he lays Carly down. That's probably the best visual we get of the entire new outfit with the proper lighting, you know. I really did like that shot. I really did like that entire scene, you know. I really didn't care much for the Global Repatriation Council in this show. I didn't care for the GRC at all, man.
I didn't care for them either.
you know, like I think in my review I said something along the lines of like, you know, they're gonna have to work really hard for us to care about the Flag Smashers ruining this get together, because I don't. Right. You know,
I feel like the GRC is a stand-in in the show for like every dysfunctional governmental body like in the world, kind of, and so it kind of funnels like, you know, like our frustration about that kind of thing towards that group, you know, that council. And so I totally agree with you there. But you were saying,
and we never even get the senator's name. So the bald guy that, you know, the bald guy that Sam gives the shield to in the beginning, you know, he's standing there talking to War Machine and Sam, and you know, and Don Cheadle kind of gives him that look like, yeah, I don't like you either. And then, you know, we see him at the end of that episode giving Walker the shield, and then, you know, we see him at, you know, the proceedings where they strip Walker of everything, and then we see him there at the end of the GRC thing. We never even get that guy's name, but he's like the face of the GRC. He's the face of the governmental body in this show.
Yeah.
And I just really don't like that guy. I really don't.
I don't like him either. Because, looking back on it, after they did the thing where they introduced John Walker and that, like, because I remember he was standing next to Rhodey at the Smithsonian or whatever when Sam was giving up the shield.
Yeah.
And looking back on it after, like if you go back and watch that first episode with him standing there, he almost looks like he's like impatient or something. Like
really.
I just know that he knew what his plans were when Sam was giving it up, and he was he just let it play out like that, and that made me hate him like all the more.
He was salivating, like he took the shield and put it in his case, knowing that he was going to take it back out of the case.
Yeah, like, and he probably did it like 5 minutes later. That's the impression that I get.
No, he was texting somebody behind his back like, we got it. We got it, guys. It's about to happen.
Get it to Walker so he can practice throwing it for the B-roll on the for the news segment.
The B-roll.
So I think that that you're totally right on with that. So I'm wondering what your reaction to and your thoughts about Sam's whole speech at the end. Like, for my part, I thought it was really inspiring. I thought it showed how Sam, like, how far he had come in terms of like acceptance of like taking this up, and I felt like it showed us how Sam was really up to being the Captain America for this day and age in a way. So what are your thoughts about? I know it's like a big moment and everything, but what do you think?
So what I really liked about it, insofar as I know, in his comic run as Captain America, once he takes the moniker, his whole thing that makes him different from Steve is that Steve was the Captain America that dealt with global and worldwide and national and domestic and international issues. Steve Rogers was all over the place, and he dealt with things everywhere. And in Sam's run as Captain America, with him not being a super soldier or being quite as capable, I guess, in some regards as Steve Rogers, he's more the grounded guy. He deals with the local and the domestic stuff. So in that speech, I love that they were just they were showing his humanity, and they were showing that he is gonna be a Captain America. Not saying that Steve Rogers wasn't. He's gonna be a Captain America of the people, right? And he, whereas I think that in Steve's early run as Captain America, he sort of had on blinders, to some of the stuff that was going on, and we kind of see him lose some of those blinders as his story goes on. Sam has gotten
out of time too, right? So
man out of time.
Get it at first, yeah.
Yep, and we see Sam have that same progression in 6 episodes, right? He takes that same pitch. So I like the speech. I like that it was coming from his perspective as a combat veteran. It was coming from his perspective as someone who had been in the military. It was coming from his perspective as being a black man. And like I said, Marvel didn't pull any punches whatsoever. In that regard, they were very forward. They were very honest. And even in the things that he says about Carly's movement, he said some really good things about her movement and what the Flag Smashers did. That he could be, not looked at too fondly for. He said, hey, what she was fighting for wasn't necessarily wrong. The way she did it maybe wasn't the best way, but if you guys continue to do things where you're doing it, she's not going to be the first. And look, 1.0 was a problem. You don't want to see 2.0. I don't want to see 2.0. So I liked his speech, and I think that it was the perfect stamp and seal on the series.
I agree, man. And I think there was something about the way he was talking that really showed his compassion in his humanity, like you said, but it was also, an acknowledgement of the complexity of the situation, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So, and he didn't condone the bad things that Carly did, but he was like, she just gave up her life to try and stop you from voting on this, and nobody's asking why that is. Yeah. He's like, you're talking about, doing this to half the people in the world, literally. You have all this power. How do you think these people are going to feel about you when you're forcing them to, move and relocate and do all this stuff, right? And so just the whole speech, I think, knocked it out of the park. And like, there's that shot of when he was really getting to it, that reaction shot on Bucky, where he was like, I felt like in that moment, Bucky was like, he well and truly got it why, in part at least, why Steve was like, this is the guy.
Yeah,
Right,
I agree.
this is the
I
guy that
100%
I need
agree.
to give the shield to. And granted, Steve didn't understand like the whole thing about what it all meant and everything, but I think that Steve was definitely right in seeing something in Sam that was important in terms of carrying on the symbol and what Steve had kind of made it into being. Does that make sense? Do you agree
Yeah,
with that?
no,
Disagree?
I 100% agree with that. And in that same vein, probably before or after that Bucky shot, they showed the shot of Isaiah Bradley, and they sort of
Yeah,
show
they're
him and
watching.
Elijah, and you can kind of see in his face. I don't know if it was more of a respect angle, because I don't think at that moment he necessarily agreed still with Sam
Mm-hmm.
taking the mantle, but you just kind of see him, seeing Sam do this and sort of just sort of coming to terms with it, like, okay, well, I feel this way, but he feels that way, and he's not wrong, So
Yeah,
I felt I felt like that was needed.
yeah, and I'm really glad they cut to him and his grandson watching that, because
Yeah.
I feel like if they would not have done that, that would have been like a real missed opportunity for some reason. But like,
Yep.
you could tell that it was impacting them, right? That they
Yeah.
were watching this and it was really resonating with them. And then, and yeah, so I mean, I thought, oh, and one of the moments that I thought was real cool was when like the bystanders are there recording it, and the one guy goes, he was like, "That's Black Falcon right there," and the guy goes, "No, that's Captain America," and I was
Yeah.
like, right on,
Yeah.
man. I like because
He was speaking for the whole fandom. He was speaking for the whole fandom.
yeah, like I felt like in that moment he was really embodying and channeling being Captain America.
Yeah.
And he's
Yes.
not, he's not exactly the same as Steve in in a lot of ways, but he doesn't have to be. And in fact, it was in my mind at least, and you can tell me what you think, it's probably good that he wasn't Steve 2.0.
Yeah. I don't know that. I don't know that, and I could be wrong. This is just my opinion. I don't know that Steve Rogers is the Captain America we need for the climate, the world
Yeah.
in the MCU is in. I
Yeah, I
don't know
think you're
that.
right.
I don't know that he. Yeah, I don't know if he's the Captain America that's needed. I think Sam is the Captain America that's needed, and I think the
Yeah.
show goes very far to sort of show us that.
I think you're right, and it reminds me of that conversation that Carly had with her flag smashers in one of the previous. It was the scene in the cemetery where they get the super soldier serum, and the one guy's like, "Oh, back in the day, I was a Captain America fan," and then they're talking about like the shield and what that means, and like she was like, Steve was great and all, but like the world's different now. It's not like the
Yes.
whole world versus the Nazis. It's like things are more complicated, and like that shield has kind of come to mean like represent like all the people that got left behind, and it kind of, and so I kind of feel like the fact that Sam is the person who's got it now, and the fact that he's the Captain America now, I feel like there's more potential there for more people to see themselves in him and to feel like that they're not going to be left behind by Captain America, or at least he's going to have their interests in mind or something. So, I don't know. Well, like,
Yeah.
do you think I'm onto something there, or?
Yeah, I do. I do. I think that the shield is going to be a completely different symbol under Sam. I know that there was some thoughts being played with of like, well, hey, if we're going from, Steve Rogers, one super soldier, let's go to another super soldier. Let's have, Bucky be Captain America. And in the comics, Bucky has held the shield for some time. But I think that in the MCU, in this realistic sort of world and take we have on these properties, you can't give the shield to Bucky Barnes, right?
Yeah.
Not with the ledger that he has. So I think that it is going to be a completely different symbol under Sam. I think that's what the speech was meant to symbolize to us. Like, hey, this is the direction we're taking it. And I would love at some point to see, I don't know if we ever will, I know that there was some talks, and again, this could be fan theory crafting, but I know that there was some talks about maybe a Captain America movie coming out at some point down the road. Captain America Man Out of Time, and again, that's just fan theory crafting. But I thought to myself, I would really love to see that movie. movie. But I think now I'm more excited about this Captain America 4 movie that the Hollywood Reporter reported on with Malcolm Spellman, the guy that was the showrunner for this show. I'm more excited for that film now to see where Sam takes it. You know, I want to see what the public discourse outside of what they frame for us in just that you know, that speech. I want to see what the overall opinion is, because as you know, there's going to be varying opinions. You know, there are going to be some people that aren't as quick to recognize him. There are going to be some bodies that aren't as quick to accept him. And, you know, that's why they had John Walker. They wanted a Captain America that they could control. And I don't think they're going to be able to control Sam. I think we see that.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think that's for the best. And I agree. I think I am more excited for like a, you know, Captain America 4 that would feature the guys that we just saw in this show versus like a Man Out of Time with Steve, or like, I don't even know what that would be. That's not to say that I wouldn't like go see that, but I'm more invested in like Sam at this point, I think.
And I would really like, at some point, I don't know, I'm sure they're going to do it at some point. You have to do it. I would just really like to see Sam in his full outfit with the shield, and, you know, old man Steve, you know, just sort of pop up on screen and recognize him. I think that would be a really cool moment.
I do want to see, you know, them meet up again at some point. I just don't know like what the appropriate place is for that. Now,
I don't either.
Now, I want to talk about Isaiah and that last scene with him next. But, you know, I heard a couple people say like they thought, oh, that scene might have been better if old man Steve would have shown up, and like, but I actually disagree with that, because I don't think that was about Steve at all.
No.
And it would have been like kind of tonally weird maybe if he would have showed up. Like, I don't think it was appropriate. So in that scene, first he goes to Isaiah's house, right?
Right.
And he has that, and they kind of talk in the backyard there, and Isaiah's like picking up the huge like trees and like moving them around, and you know, Sam's talking to him, and Isaiah's like, shit, you almost got me with that. And he does admit that Sam's got something special and everything. So like, how did that scene hit you, and like, what did you think about that?
Oh man, I really liked it. So I really liked it. I really liked that scene at the end. And, you know, I always find it interesting how in trailers, they will literally give us shots from the most impactful moments of the series, right? So that shot of Sam sitting on the steps, we got that in the early trailer.
That's
you know,
true.
we just didn't know what the context was. So that backyard scene was awesome. I really liked the backyard scene. And you're right. You know, I had seen also conversations about, hey, you know, if they do this museum scene, wouldn't it be so awesome for Steve to show up and to hand Isaiah the shield, or to show up and acknowledge Isaiah, right? Because technically, you know, if we're not going off the moniker and we're going off the abilities, you know, Isaiah Bradley in the comics comes before Steve. You know, Steve comes after Isaiah Bradley, right? So it would have been a cool, you know, sort of fan moment, but I think it all depended on how they framed it. You know, if they had framed it in a different way where, you know, Isaiah Bradley is walking through the museum and seeing all these images of Steve, and he's seeing people talk about Steve and love Steve, and then Sam showed him, you know, his sort of section, I could see how it would have been sort of cool to have Steve be there. But like you said, tonally, it would have just been an interruption. I think, you know, in that moment, to have Sam, you know, be the guy that, you know, because it's about Sam, right? It's about Sam. It's about Isaiah. And it's also about having his grandson Elijah there as well. You know, because we know that somewhere down the road we may see him, you know, in a possible Young Avengers team up. You know, I think they did a pretty good job throughout the whole series, really placing him and Sam in this sort of cool relationship. You know, when Sam first shows up to talk to Isaiah with the shield, you know, they have that little interaction, you know, and Eli's like, I'll be back there, and Sam's like, oh, okay. So they sort of have that sort of cool back and forth. So I think the way they framed it, I think the way that scene went was perfect. You know, they didn't spend too much time in it to where it was awkward, to where it could fall flat. And I don't think Steve was needed at all. It would have been cool maybe, but I think it would have really taken away from the significance of Sam being a new black Captain America, you know, finally giving Isaiah and his black regiment due. I think it was perfect.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. And Carl Lumbly, who played Isaiah Bradley in this, man, he's so good.
He's so good. He's so
good. And I just thought, and Anthony Mackie's so good too. And so I really felt emotion in these scenes with them. It's like, I can't say that I can relate to everything that Isaiah's been through or Sam or anything, but like, they acted the hell out of this scene, and I think you really feel it. And it seemed like Sam honored Isaiah and what he had been through without breaking his promise, because I don't get the impression he was like, and Isaiah's alive and he lives over here. So he like respected Isaiah's wishes, but at the same time was able to like honor him and like do this. And maybe that's a step, in a direction that can make things in the present a little bit better for Isaiah, at least, in his own mind, if nothing else.
Yep, and they left the door wide open, right? They don't come out and say that, there is no exposition that says, hey, Sam went to the government and told him about, Isaiah Bradley's, existence, and that he lives here, and he needs to be remembered in this way, right? They sort of left that door wide open as to how it takes place, but I do think something we're supposed to walk away from that scene with is, as Captain America, Sam does have a bit of sway now. I'm sure it took a bit of sway to get that there in that museum. So, I think that's our first sort of indicator of the newfound respect and sort of status he may hold.
Yeah, it's interesting because, first, I think maybe the first thing that happens is like he brings that pilot down onto the bridge and protects him with the wings and the shield when the helicopter like bumps him. And like, and that was awesome because like the people on the bridge are like, and he gets that like, hero cheer moment. And then of course, when he lands and he goes through that whole speech, like he's like on live TV as that's happening. And so I think that he's earned like a big, like huge amount of like public support, right?
Yeah. I agree.
This is something that like now the government can't be like, oh, give us the shield, because A, they don't even own it to begin with, right? B, it's probably known by somebody at this point that Steve actually gave it to Sam, I would imagine. Yep. And so like also like just from a PR perspective, because like I'm kind of cynical about all the government people, like they almost like have to support him. Like you can imagine like some figures here and there, like saying something about him, but like overall, you're right. I think he's got that clout now as Captain America to where he has some pull in all of that. And so, maybe that played into him being able to get that exhibit. So, and that's a real interesting thing that I hope they get into, like, whenever we see Sam next, right?
Yeah, and I would imagine that, what is the Don Cheadle-led show we're going to be getting next year? Is it going to be Armor Wars?
I think.
Yeah, Armor Wars. So I'm pretty sure we'll be seeing Sam again in Armor Wars. I would expect so.
Yeah, even if he just shows up for a minute, right?
Yeah, just briefly.
Probably.
Just briefly.
Yeah, that'll be really cool. Okay, so we've gone through a lot of stuff. And so real quick, I'll just mention, like, I thought it was so cool at the end when they showed the title and it was Captain America and the Winter Soldier. Like, that hit me in the right way. Like, I thought that was really nice that they sort of updated that. And you could imagine if indeed there's like a second season of the show, that's what it would be called, right? So, like, how did that hit you when you saw that?
So I really liked it. It was a really cool reveal, right? And when I saw that, even before I knew that the Hollywood Reporter had come out and said that there was going to be a Captain America 4 film, when I saw that, I was like, oh, okay, this is a one-shot season, and this is going to be the name of the next movie. That was my original thought, and then it comes out there's going to be a Captain America 4. So I think that could be the name of the next movie. I mean, I don't see why not. I don't see why you don't take it there.
I think it might be, but the only reason they might change the title slightly is depending on if it comes out like after another season of the show, because like they didn't call it a limited series like they did with WandaVision.
They did not. They did not.
Right. So I think maybe they might do another season. And then also the one movie was called Captain America: The Winter Soldier. So maybe they might switch it up just so that people don't get confused. I don't know, but
that's
I think
a good point.
A great title.
Yep, that is a good point. That is a very good point.
But yeah, I thought that was really cool. Okay, so what are your thoughts now? Briefly on like the whole show, not just the final episode. Like if you could kind of just summarize your thoughts on like the whole show at this point.
So coming into this year, after the announcement of the new slate for Disney Plus, I wasn't really that excited for WandaVision, because I mean we didn't know too much about those characters outside of what we've seen in the movies. I was excited for the Falcon and the Winter Soldier just because I knew I knew where they could take that show. So I was excited for the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and I was excited for the Loki show, right? And then WandaVision was this very pleasant surprise that we got, right? And I think that the Falcon and the Winter Soldier took it even further, like they set the bar really high with these shows so far. So I think that, I don't want to put the two, I don't want to compare the two shows because they're very different in the way that they were billed, and they're very different in the way that they came off and that they were presented to us. But I think that if WandaVision nailed the landing, kicking off the Marvel Disney Plus slate, I think that the Falcon and the Winter Soldier successfully took the ball and took it a little bit further. Like it left off that slate for Loki to pick it up and take it wherever they wanted to take it from that point forward. Yeah. So, if there's a pass fail metric, the Falcon and the Winter Soldier clearly passes. If there's a 1 to 10 metric as to, how I felt about the show overall, it's got to be somewhere in that 8 to 9.5 range, and the only reasons that I would not give it that full 10 out of 10 is that full 10 out of 10 rating is because like I said, I didn't really care for the development and the direction they chose to take the Sharon character. I feel like, I feel like that whole power broker angle with her was dragged out a lot longer than it needed to be, and I feel like I didn't necessarily like where they ended with the John Walker character, but all of this stuff is objective, so overall I like the show and I like what they did with the two characters that the show was mainly about. So I liked it, and I would love to see a season 2. I really would, man. Like bring it back. Let's run it back.
Me too. I'm on board. I think with I think I probably would rate it about the same as like maybe like an 8.5 to 9 or something like that. And the thing with Sharon is it does seem a little weird. So I feel like they have to show us more about why she made that switch. Although I also have a theory about that I'm going to get into when we speculate in a minute. But I think they did a great job of keeping it focused on Sam and Bucky, right? And so that's why we didn't need Old Man Steve, and that's why we didn't need somebody else to show it from the MCU, and that's why that's why we didn't get more from John Walker at the end, because ultimately it wasn't about him, and they still have him around to cause trouble in the future or whatever he's going to be involved in. And I think that there's a lot they can do with his character, because he does kind of have this, he has these problems, and like I said, I wouldn't quite call him a villain, but he's definitely not a straight up like hero either.
Yeah. He's an anti-hero for sure. He's an anti-hero for sure.
Yeah, right. So, anyways, I think I'm pretty much on board with that. And I think looking back at it, like, I'm going to have to, like, take some time to reflect, and I may even, like, watch it all over again, because there's I think this movie got way deeper, or this show. I mean, it is kind of like a 6-hour MCU movie, but but I think it got way deeper than I expected it to. But like, I'm pleasantly surprised that that's what it did, because I kind of feel like if they hadn't given it the depth that it has and explored the themes that they did explore with it, that it would have been harder to get the fan base on board with Sam carrying the shield, maybe. it might have just come off as like more of a like a shallow, now it's time for the next guy to like shove himself into the suit and like, not that I disliked Sam before this at all.
Yeah.
I'm just saying I think that like the journey that they took him on and like the audience on through this was like important in some way. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. They earned they earned the ending of this show. Where they left the characters at, they earned it. Saying we didn't just get Sam inheriting the shield and a new cool outfit. We got the full story, we got the full run. We had to deal with all of the emotional highs and lows of it. We had to deal with some of the people having to lose their lives and different things like that. They earned it. In this show, in the 6 episodes. I was a little concerned about the runtime just because, we got 9 episodes with WandaVision, but those were significantly shorter episodes. You would blink 2 times and the show would be over. So, and these were longer episodes. So, and
I think overall, like the overall length of this show is actually more than WandaVision by a little bit.
Yeah, it is, So essentially, we got 2 3-hour movies, Basically,
exactly.
It's basically what we got. So
okay. So like, I'd love to do a little bit of speculation and theories before we call it a day. So, so first, the Flag Smashers, they seem to have people everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Including, as we saw, within the council security, right? So do you see this movement, if we're going to call it that, playing a part in the MCU moving forward? And what do you think about that?
Yeah, so I do. I think it intermittently we'll see them again. There may be other people that take the cause up and sort of take it further, with Carly being gone and some of, all of the original 4 or 5. I think there is, like I said, Marvel does a fantastic job of giving themselves breathing room, right? So the one guy that, Sam goes at the end to fish out of the river, maybe he gets away. And maybe he's able to go and, sort of ignite another fire. And I think Carly says it at one point in the episode that, even if we die, the movement's strong enough to sort of keep going, right? Yeah. So I do think that we will see them, even if it's, just little one-off shots or news clippings about, this Flag Smasher thing here, this Flag Smasher thing there. And I'm sure we may even see their cause become more and more, violent. Like we may see another villain at some point that takes it a bit further than even, Carly would have. Or maybe we see Sharon's character, sort of take the movement over now, and use it, to, because she's going to have that inside hand, inside the U.S. government. So, maybe she takes it and uses it to her, her vices to, figure out whatever kind of cool stuff they've got going on she doesn't have access to.
I didn't even think about that, but that seems like something she would do as power broker.
It does.
Right?
Yeah, it does.
I wouldn't even be surprised if we get to see them, like, just little hints of them or something, like in the next couple shows that are coming out, like She-Hulk and Armor Wars and all that. Like that could be a possibility. That's interesting. So, Here's one that I've been thinking about. Like, do you see do you think it's possible Isaiah could come back in a future movie or show? Because like I could see something where, in like a movie or something coming up down the line where it's like, you remember that moment in Civil War where Sam and Steve are on the run with Bucky and they're like, crap, what do? We need backup. And Sam's like, I think I know a guy, and he's talking about Ant-Man.
Yeah.
Do you think could be like something like that where they kind of pull him in and he's, maybe not excited about it, but he decides to show up and, help out? Or like, do you think he'll be more of like a, in the background type of a character?
So I think there are 2 ways that we maybe see him again, right? One way for sure we'll definitely see him again, right? I think one of the ways that we could see him again is I do believe that his grandson Eli will eventually have some of his abilities passed on to him. In the comics, he gets his grandfather's abilities via a blood transfusion, right? So I do think that's a way that we're going to end up having to see him. I think, we'll see, however they decide to, implement the Young Avengers in the MCU. I think we'll see him in that regard. I do think tragically that something could happen to him. I think that maybe something happens to him. And so we see, him in that way, sort of like in wrestling, they have the terms of like baby faces and heels, and you have to give somebody the rub. So maybe, in order for the MCU to establish a new villain and to establish the base for hate for a new villain, we see them kill a lot, we see them kill him, so I think that that's something that we could see too. I don't know if we see him in action unless it's a flashback, because I mean, he is a pretty old guy now, and I think they keep things fairly, unless it's one of those scenes like, I don't know if you remember, like, but back when like the Avengers were having the showdown in New York and stuff, and everybody was just like, just show us a 5-second clip of the Netflix Marvel people, fighting people off, on like the street, So if there's like another massive invasion angle and they're showing people around the world dealing with it, I think we could see like a shot of like, Isaiah Street, and he's just like beating the crap out of like these CGI aliens or something
like a monster comes down and he's like, boom.
Yeah. He's like, did you really just land in my garden? Okay.
You don't mess with Isaiah's garden.
Yeah. So I don't think that could happen at all, but it would be a cool thing to see down the road. But I think the only way we see Isaiah Bradley going further is if it's got something to do with his grandson, Eli.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I have heard some, rumors about maybe some Young Avengers, so that'd be interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so now Contessa Valentina, blah, 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 Pellegrino.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of wondering about her because, so do you think that she, like, who's she working with or for? Like, do you think it's like a Hydra thing? Do you think she's working with Sharon? Do you think it's her own enterprise? Do you think it's she's more connected to like maybe like Ross or the CIA and the Thunderbolts, or like, what do you think is the deal with her and her connection with Walker?
So, when you have an actress as big as JLD, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, this woman is arguably one of the most decorated, television actresses of all time, right? So I don't think you bring somebody like her in to just have them be a sub to Thunderbolt Ross or to be a sub to Sharon, right? I think that she is a Nick Fury level character, right? So I think that maybe she runs her own organization. Maybe she works parallel to like a Thunderbolt Ross, and maybe later once they establish her a bit more, she works parallel to somebody like a Sharon. I don't know what organization per se. I mean, we've done the Hydra thing, a lot. So maybe there's a new organization. Now, I could see her working hand in hand with Doom, if they plan to introduce Dr. Doom to the MCU, right? I could see that, I haven't made a decision yet as to whether or not if she's going to be like an anti-hero sort of character, or if she's just like a, by any means necessary sort of character, like Thunderbolt Ross. He's not necessarily a villain, he's a dick, but he's not a villain, right?
Right.
But when Thanos shows up, he doesn't want, he wants the world to live, right? So I think that she'll work more in that vein. I think she'll be a character that by any means necessary, she wants to get things done. But organization wise, she is Madam Hydra in the comics. She does end up being a Russian sleeper agent. We could see Leviathan. We could see the group Leviathan. So maybe now that I think about it, I think it's Leviathan. I think the group that she's working for is Leviathan. Maybe it's another take on Hydra, or maybe it's sort of that morphed into something else. But I think it's going to be a new group that won't be Hydra.
Do you think, I don't know anything about Leviathan, but do you think there's any possibility that she's like going to be involved in putting together like a Dark Avengers team, or like, is that?
Yes. Yep. Yeah. So
okay.
I don't know if they'll have Thunderbolts and Dark Avengers. I think they'll have one of the two. So I think that she will be involved in the Thunderbolts. So
Okay.
and that's the whole thing with her working hand in hand with Ross down the road.
But
I don't
not
think.
necessarily like his subordinate or
Yeah,
something.
yeah, no, no, not his subordinate. I think she's higher than him.
Mm.
So, but maybe since she's the one giving John Walker his legs and his new platform, maybe Thunderbolt Ross goes to her to
Mm.
borrow, or maybe like just kind of use John Walker from time to time for his
Mm-hmm.
means.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
But
To be
yeah,
kind of like
I
his
think that's
manager.
where. Yeah, basically. Yeah,
Yeah.
she'll be his
Okay.
manager.
That's cool. Okay. So let's talk about Sharon for a minute. So she's obviously talking on the phone to somebody. Now, do you think that was just her like minion, or do you think that she has like a partner in crime, or like what do you in other words, what do you think is up with her and what
I
her
think
ultimate goals are?
so. If you think about the scene back where they go over to Madripoor, and they're seeing a person in the back room, and the person gets shot, right, and the sniper. I think that the sniper was her driver that we later see in that episode, where she comes around the
Mm,
corner. She's like, hey, we got a new problem. I'll tell you about
mm,
it. I just assumed that person, that was the person she was talking to.
yeah,
But I mean, again, the MCU giving themselves breathing room to later come up with something else.
yeah,
It could be a bigger big bad, that we don't exactly know about yet.
yeah.
Um,
On that note, I have a theory. I want to get your thoughts on it.
okay.
I think there's a decent chance that Sharon in this is actually a Skrull. Because part of that comes from me like thinking, is this really who Sharon is? To where, I mean, she's been through a lot and she's been kind of hung out to dry for the better part of a decade and like all this stuff. But like, is it also possible that she's a Skrull and she's going about the business of like setting up the secret invasion in some way? Like, do you think that's plausible at all, or what do you think about that?
I do think that's plausible, right? Because in the comics, Secret Invasion is like it's this just ridiculous. It's this ridiculous thing of just crazy magnitude, right? Like the
Mm-hmm.
Skrulls have invaded every single aspect of our society. So if they want to relay that in the MCU the proper way, hey, have Sharon be a scroll, end all of your Disney Plus shows, with a scroll you coming out, right? And
I,
we've already
I,
seen that in
yeah,
WandaVision, so I
yeah,
like that. I hadn't really put too much thought into that, but yeah, Sharon could be a scroll, right? Because to me, I don't really like the idea of this person coming from the lineage of Peggy Carter, right? Agent
mm-hmm,
Carter, they had,
mm-hmm,
I mean, Haley Atwell had her own season. If Disney Plus
yeah,
was around a few years ago, Agent Carter would have been on Disney Plus, right?
yeah, yeah,
So I mean, to come from that lineage to end up, falling out, and becoming the power broker, I think that that's not necessarily the route I would have wanted to see her character grow. But if she is a scroll, then hey, that could be. And when you think about it, Fury does have scrolls at his employ, right? It was Fury that had Sharon Carter acting as Kate in Winter Soldier as
yeah,
Cap's neighbor, right? So
mm-hmm,
why
mm-hmm,
would we believe that Fury, now being in space, why would we believe that he would just leave one of his loyal agents out to dry? You know,
right, right.
so I do like that theory. I'm gonna really put some thought into that. I'm so
Okay.
happy you brought that
Yeah,
up.
let me know. Let me know if you come up with anything on that. But I just thought.
Yeah,
Plus, to your point earlier, where you said, they're all like Feige and them are always thinking so far ahead. Like
yeah,
they already announced the Secret War show coming up,
yep,
right?
yep,
And
yeah.
so you got to think that they might be like sprinkling some breadcrumbs on their way up to that. So
Yeah,
I'm just
and I'm
wondering if.
incredibly excited for that, man. Now that they've announced that Amelia Clark's going to be in it,
Oh yeah, that's right.
that's
Yeah.
going to be awesome.
Yeah, yeah, I'm really looking forward to that, and of course, I love me some Sam Jackson, so I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to seeing him come back on that. So okay, so uh, so do you? Okay, here's my last big question, which is, do you have any knowledge of anything from the comics that might give us an idea of where we're headed after this show? I know that the comics aren't always like one-to-one with the shows and everything, but I'm just wondering if there's anything that you get from the comics that you think, oh, they might be heading into this, or just like anything.
So where I think we're going, with my knowledge of the comics is, I think that we are going to see Sam continue to be a grounded, domestic, local, neighborhood Captain America. I do think we're going to see a lot more of that, right? I also think that his presence in a post-blip secret invasion America is going to be very important, right? Because, with this new Avengers team coming up, and, with the tragic passing of Chadwick Boseman, right? Who's going to lead the new group of Avengers, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people would assume that it's going to be Captain Marvel. And I don't know if she's been received that well in the MCU fandom, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people would assume it would be Doctor Strange. But sometimes the issue with when you lock down these big, huge actors for these roles, you can't keep them, right? I mean, how much longer is a guy like Benedict Cumberbatch going to stick around in the MCU? I mean, he's one of the top 20 working actors in the world right now, right?
Yeah.
So and Brie Larson, she's an award-winning actress. How much longer are you going to be able to keep her around, right?
Yeah.
So they're giving themselves all of these back doors. Okay, so if Brie Larson is going to leave, well, in the comics, Monica Rambeau was the first Captain Marvel, right? And if Doctor Strange is gonna take off, okay, well, you still got Baron Mordo, and Wong's kind of a likable character, and I don't know as much about the Doctor Strange comics, but I'm sure there's somebody there that they could also move up to that role. So I think that it's going to be interesting to see how they position the Captain America character going into Secret Invasions. But I think that in the next Captain America film, we will start to see some of that bleed over. We're going to start to see, we're going to start to see, okay, what's happening? Why are all these people that we think act one way acting another way? And what's the line that Sam and Bucky have in the beginning of this show? They're like, the big three. You got wizards, you got aliens,
androids, and wizards, or whatever.
yeah. I really can't wait for the moment where like, oh man, okay, now it's the big four. We got I guess Skrulls will fall into aliens. So this is another big three moment. Yeah,
it's so funny because that was like true what he said. They are fighting that stuff a lot. Yeah, I mean,
that's it.
It's interesting, and I had read a couple rumors about like that the new Captain Marvel movie, Captain Marvel 2, coming up, is going to be a very sort of like almost Avengers level movie, similar to the way that like movies like Civil War were, where you have a crossing over of a lot of the characters from the other franchises, right? And it may not be an Avengers movie per se, but you still have a lot of those characters in it, And for anybody watching this, we actually did a Captain Marvel 2 sequel pitch on our audio-only podcast.
Awesome!
Late last year. Yeah, check it out. We had a couple guests on. It was one of my favorite episodes that we've done. Actually, it was really fun.
Okay.
We did a few like sequel pitch episodes. We did Terminator. We did Captain Marvel 2. We did Alien franchise. And then at Christmas time we did what if there was a Marvel Star Wars crossover movie? What would that look like? So I just thought of it now because we were talking about Captain Marvel 2. But those are really fun.
Yeah. Well, hey, isn't the proper Alien sequel that really terrible Cowboys versus Aliens movie they released a few years back?
No, it wasn't like that. No, it wasn't like that. But I mean, I hope to see another Alien movie at some point too. So Ritton, thank you for coming on to the show and having this really fun conversation with me where we really got to geek out about Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Captain America and the Winter Soldier by the end. So like, what can you tell our folks like where they can find you online and what you're doing and all that?
Yeah, awesome. So, man, thanks, Will, for having me. This has been fantastic. Like you said, it's not awesome. It's not often that we get to all come together and sort of geek out in
Yeah.
safe spaces.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
thank you for having me, man. This has been awesome, and you giving me some things to think about on my own that I really hadn't considered. With this show. So, you can find me everywhere. I have my own YouTube channel. It's just youtube.com/c/written flows, or you can just search written flows and my content comes up. So I do weekly reviews for all Marvel and Star Wars Disney Plus content. So going forward, that's going to be a lot. I also review all films that I watch. So I watch a variety of films. I've got a review coming out for Godzilla vs. Kong.
Nice.
I've got a review coming out for Mortal Kombat, which I just watched like 2 days ago, which I
just
loved.
watched it 2 days ago too. Nice.
Yeah. I like foreign film as well. So I have a review coming from Minari that I just watched, which I really love that too. So you can find me on YouTube. You can find me on Instagram at Written Flows. You can find me on Twitter at Written Flows, and maybe at some point we have a TikTok too. So
TikTok, nice, yeah.
Yeah, wherever you're looking for me, it's gonna be Written Flows. So,
and I'll put your links in our like show notes down below. And also, if you're just listening to this on audio, it's Written Flows is WRITTENFLOWS.
yes.
Right. So yeah. Okay. I got that right. Great.
Yeah.
So and hey, for those of you watching or listening, let us know what you think in the comments, or reach out to Mechadragon on Twitter at MechadragonShow. Same on Instagram, or you can email us at mechadragonshow@gmail.com. So yeah, thanks again, Written. This has been really fun for me too.
Awesome.
And take care, man.
Thank you. You take care as well.
All right. Bye, everybody.